Hello and welcome to the Miko Bits show. And I'm your host, Miko Bits. And today we have Greg Osuri, who is the CEO and founder of Akash Networks, which is a very exciting compute cloud. So hopefully I got that right, and we'll find out quite a lot more as we get into this. So first, quick disclaimer: it is opinion and information entertainment show. It is not intended to be investment advice. So seek a licensed professional for that. So, I guess without further ado, here's Greg.
Thank you, Miko.
It's great to be here. Yeah, it's great having you on the show. So I guess the first question that's super easy is, what is Akash Network? Like, how would you describe it?
So Akash is a peer-to-peer marketplace for cloud computing resources and a deployment platform for modern distributed workloads. The big difference or the big value it provides compared to the incumbent, it's designed for a very modern developer. So what takes normally tens of hours on a cloud takes minutes, right? So developers can do more with less. And it is private and permissionless. So there's no sign up. It's got this incredible user experience that you get with permissionless networks. And it's, of course, unstoppable, censorship resistant. I think that's becoming more and more important considering what's happening today. And a big value is cost. I mean, cost anywhere from 2 to 3x on a normal, lower than the Amazons and Googles and Microsofts. In some cases, even 10 times lower. So that's an incredible value proposition.
Wow, that's astonishing. So you get modernity, you get this private and permissionless quality, and then you get much lower costs. So that seems like an amazing combination, a very sweet spot. Yeah. So what are the kinds of, what's the current state of the network?
We are in testnet in the sense that, so we have a mainnet, which does token operations. The platform is being released on 14th of Feb, so less than a month. The platform is going to mainnet, before which we launched a testnet to showcase the platform. And during the testnet phase, we were the fastest growing cloud in the world with 3,800 deployments, about 480 active developers. To give you a context, Polkadot has about 420 monthly active developers, and Ethereum has about 2,500 plus monthly active developers. So we were somewhere in around 480 active developers, and about 80 unique applications being deployed and being shared with other users on Akash. Applications that include primarily a lot of DeFi applications, front ends and node infrastructure. Just being in crypto, I suppose, is way more attractive, the whole like unstoppable and decentralized nature of the cloud. But quite a bit outside crypto as well. We're seeing like MySQL clusters. We saw a bunch of games deploy. There's Pac-Man and Mario Brothers running on Akash. Lots of self-sovereign publishing platforms. So Mattermost, Ghost, blogging platform, and particularly interested in Ghost because it's supposedly this anonymous and privacy optimized blogging platform running on Akash. We even saw WordPress people deploying on Akash. It's a whole range of applications. There's a GitHub repo called Awesome Akash. You can actually go check out, and it lists all the applications users built and share the configuration files with other people that can actually go deploy these applications. So come mainnet, which is coming on the mainnet 2, which is coming on the 15th, we'll have about 80 applications in the catalog that people can use. And hopefully, I'm not sure if you've been following closely what's happening in the DeFi side of things, especially in decentralization. Thorchain tweeted out recently incentivizing their community to port Thorchain nodes from AWS to Akash, and there is a reward for $1,500 worth of Rune, about 1,000 Rune. I guess now it went up to 30% today. So,
yeah,
so it was at least $2,000 worth of Rune reward for people to write configuration files to port over Tor to Akash. So lots of excitement in the DeFi community.
Wow, that is fantastic, and it's a very exciting thing. So tell me about kind of do you have kind of mainnet plans and like token plans, or what's the vision at the moment?
So token is liquid and mainnet is alive. We launched our mainnet on 25th of September last year.
Yeah.
The first mainnet is a token mainnet. It doesn't include the platform operations, which is deployment and whatnot. And the reason we wanted to launch two mainnets is because we wanted to decouple the platform functionality from the blockchain functionality to reduce the risk. Like to avoid exactly what happened to Filecoin when they crashed and everything came down. So we wanted to decouple and so we launched our mainnet in September. The mainnet 1, the mainnet 2 is coming in Feb 14 on Feb 14th. So in less than a month, we should have platform functionality.
Wow, that's very exciting. So, in terms of like the developer experience, you were describing kind of modern development environment. Like, can you kind of talk about the developer experience and the kind of abstraction layers or APIs, or what are how does a developer interact with Akash?
Absolutely. So a few things. Akash uses this technology called Linux containers. Linux containers are a very modern way to package applications.
Yep.
And very commonly adopted today, right? So, and Akash is built on Kubernetes, so the extents that experience is very familiar to the developer, and the developers describe their workloads in a very simple declarative language we created called SDL. Think of it like a very simple smart contract language in the sense that you can define a contract language in the sense that you can define your workload, how much you're willing to pay for the workload, where you want to see these workload deployed in terms of regions, like you want one in East Coast, West Coast, in Europe, and whatnot, all in a very, very simple manifest file that you essentially submit to the Akash blockchain. And the system will go find a host or a provider that matches all these attributes and that's willing to offer that offers the lowest cost to deploy your workload, right? So the lift that's required from a developer standpoint to port something from Amazon to Akash is super minimal, right? So it's the same sort of like container that you probably used to deploy on Amazon, you can use to deploy on Akash with very little changes. And I mean, if you try doing the same thing on Amazon, you go create this cloud formation file, which is extremely complicated JSON file. So it's if it takes something on average, I think if it takes something that'll about 2 hours on Amazon, it'll take about 10 minutes on Akash, just to give you the interaction. On top of that, there's no user sign up, there's no verification, none of that. So you get this beautiful user experience, very similar to how you would deploy, how you would swap tokens on Uniswap. Like if you compare Uniswap to a centralized exchange, if you want to swap two tokens on a centralized exchange, you go log in and you verify your captcha, then you connect your bank account. Then it's probably another KYC layer that you got to go through. Then you transfer your funds, then wait for a while, and then then swap, wait for a while, and then withdraw. Then with the series of verification steps further on. So that is versus going to Uniswap where you just go and like click, done, right?
Yeah.
So imagine very similar experience where there are no signups, there's no verification, none of that nonsense that you normally have to go through to get an account on Amazon. Minus that, the abstraction layer, the programming language is much simpler, much cleaner, very, very modern, takes a very modern approach to declarative language. So it's a whole lot of things going on that adds to the simplicity of developer experience. And the tool chainers.
Got it.
There are no dependencies. When you download it, it's very, very quick and whatnot.
That's nice, right? Because I mean, if you look at the history of kind of like complex DevOps tool chains, and you look at like Chef and Puppet and Ansible and all these kind of like more sophisticated tools. A lot of them kind of deal with these sort of hybrid cloud edge cases, and like they have to deal with a lot of complex topologies, right? Whereas the thing that it sounds like it's nice is that you're able to take this STL declarative kind of effectively like a cloud deployment descriptor, and you're able to kind of coordinate distributed resources. So I guess my question for you is, what is the runtime environment like? And is this kind of a decentralized, incentivized runtime environment, or to what extent are there? I mean, is it kind of almost like a validator mindset, or is it more like a Filecoin mindset, or like what's the mindset of like the runtime? Like who's running your container?
Yes. So there is a tenant that deploys the workload, and then there's a validator that validates the blockchain itself, and then there is a provider which runs the workload, right?
Yeah.
So the validators are essentially, and these are decoupled roles, and the design is there for a good reason. Validators are exclusively handling the security of the blockchain. Whereas providers are exclusively running the workloads. There's not too much relation between these both, except for the fact that they play the role in the ecosystem. Unlike Filecoin, in that sense, it's very similar to Filecoin, right? With the proof of stake sort of like angle to it.
Yep.
From a verifiability, minus the verifiability. So Akash doesn't do verifiability. It's a reputation-based system. So the providers are effectively, and the honesty of a provider comes through a decentralized way to audit the attributes for a provider, to essentially, very similar to how you would create lists on Uniswap.
Sure.
If something is listed on Uniswap, you don't know if this is real or not, right? So Uniswap has this token list. Akash has a very similar model, except the listing is effectively on-chain versus Uniswap, which is off-chain.
Interesting. So basically then, like, if you look at the Uniswap model, the funny thing that you're really, asserting that basically different tokens, in quotes, are effectively kind of different compute properties of the underlying substrate, right? And in a sense that people are providing liquidity in the form of specific compute substrates, right? So for example, if your deployment descriptor is like, I don't want to run on an environment like X, I want to run on Y, right? Then it depends on the kind of liquidity of Y, right? Like in the sense that like, what if you have like a, because you're talking about things like region, right? So like, it's like, well, I really need X nodes in X region, right? So that becomes kind of a problem at some level, right? So I'm kind of curious, how do you factor into those, how do you deal with that? I mean, I understand you have a P2P marketplace, right? So, it feels like obviously supply and demand will start to kind of like help, but I'm trying to understand, how did you set the network up, and how do you, what is there an anchor tenant? Like, is there some base, like do you back into AWS, or how do you, and how do you deal with that, and how do you get the cost reduction? So those are, I guess, two big different questions.
Of course. First, I'll talk about like how do providers listen. So any provider is a decentralized system. So anyone with a compute that has a Kubernetes cluster can plug in and become a provider on Akash. Now, the question is, how do you know this provider is honest, right? So the whole, like, the verifiability comes into play. And cloud is, before I get into the whole verification thing, cloud is complex. So you have on-chain verifiable stuff. You can, to a certain degree, verify memory. You can verify disk. You can't verify during runtime. You can verify pre and post runtime.
Yeah.
Right. They're like memory hard functions and whatnot you can apply. So, but the question's about like location. Like, how do you verify location? There's no, guess there's somebody working on something. How do you verify compliance? Right? Like, okay, you want like a tier 4 data center or a tier 1 data center, or you want a SOC compliant data center or not, right? There's so many attributes that are not very hard, but impossible to verify, and these have to be done offline, right? So in order to, and we have this functionality where anyone, like Overclock Labs, which is a company that created Akash, could effectively create a list, a verified list of attributes, verifying Equinix as a data center. And I mean, this is effectively done offline, and Overclock Labs certifies this Equinix, very similar to how you would give a certificate for SSL chains. And the tenant can choose to trust the overclock chain in the sense. So anybody can co-create these chains. And then it's very similar to like the web of trust model, but except the fact that it's just one layer of trust, not multiple layers of trust. So anybody can create these chains, and you choose to trust that the chain or not. Now, that's important when you have sensitive workloads, but when you don't have sensitive workloads, say, for example, you're just crunching numbers for a machine learning job where each number is pretty much isolated, each job is pretty much isolated for the function, you don't need that level of verification, that level of sensitivity, or that level of privacy. Then you can go widen the net. You're like, okay, I don't care about running exclusively on Equinix data centers. I can run on a data center in Ukraine. I don't care about privacy, right? So so what Akash provides is this base layer cloud marketplace, right? Where the really comes about, where the power really comes about plugging in and opening up the marketplace to all these providers, in which there are about 8.2 million data centers in the world, about 4,000 providers that we know of. And they all have some sort of a way to like sell their compute. Akash gives them the software and the know-how from a Kubernetes standpoint on how to offer this compute, and gives them this amazing, like, gives the providers this amazing like software stack that they can further give to their customers, right? So, and from a cost perspective, so the just apples to apples cost from Amazon to other providers in our network is about 2 to 3 times lower, right? This is just as pure hardware cost. Amazon has a high markup, and we're just talking about compute markup, and additionally, you have other services. The Amazon markup is high, right? So the Amazon hook and grab, I mean, they get you in with early discounts, but once you're in, they open up, and then you're stuck with them. So that's the Amazon model, right? So whereas a lot of our providers, Equinix, for example, Equinix provides compute to Amazon itself, right? If you want to transfer compute from 2 data centers to Amazon data centers or 2 Amazon regions, you go through Equinix data centers. So you're going directly to the source, and we are giving them the power to be in Amazon. So the cost is obviously lower because Equinix is selling to Amazon at a premium. So you don't have the premium when you go directly to the source. And second is the diversity of machines, right? So Amazon is very limited, and they have a 3-year cycle on what machines that they offer. And they have this certain, criteria on what machines to select and whatnot, whereas Akash is open, right? So that invites, when you have a diverse enough workload, you can actually take advantage of these older machines that may not be available on Amazon. And third advantage comes through this amazing subsidy model we created. So Akash is a proof of stake chain, and it uses an interesting way to borrow from the future. So I wrote this paper, it's on our blog. We use inflationary rewards to subsidize some of the cost where it's not very attractive for some of the providers to provide compute at. For example, say I have a workload, I'm paying like $10 on Amazon, and I want to see if I can pay $1 or $2 in cash, right? So you can actually go set the price. Say I want to pay $2 or $1, and throw that on chain. Wait for a provider to pick the job up. If there's no provider that's picking the job up, the $1 becomes $2, and the extra $1 comes from the network itself, from the inflation rewards we take. So it just keeps upping the price, and the difference comes from the network proof of stake rewards, right? Staking rewards, till the time it becomes very attractive to a provider. So in a case like that, the customer is still paying $1. It might go up to $9 if nobody's picking up the job. The $9 and the $8 comes from the staking rewards, and that's a way to subsidize compute. So if you combine all these, you get incredible discount as a developer.
Wow, that's quite amazing. And so in terms of kind of like the supply side, like you've kind of obviously, it's open source and, a data center running a Kubernetes cluster can just join it, so obviously there's a lot of independent activity, but like, initially did you have to kind of like get some anchor tenants or people who agree to supply? Because it feels like you need
Yeah.
at least a baseline amount of supply in order for this to work.
Yeah. Our first biggest exclusive provider, and we were launching the mainnet too, is Equinix Metal.
Okay.
So Equinix is the largest data center provider in the world.
Yep.
So they are providing almost all the computing. They have about 100 regions, so they're pretty well distributed.
Wow, it's pretty amazing and very cool.
And their biggest customer, I believe, is Amazon. So
So tell me about like what's upcoming. So, I think obviously it sounds like you've got this kind of like main 2 launch, and so what are the things that people should be watching out for?
that is the biggest upcoming launch, and this is the first time something like Akash is ever introduced to the market. So Mainnet 2, we'll be onboarding few ecosystem projects, mostly from the Serum and Solana ecosystem. We're hoping to get a lot of their nodes on Akash, and a lot of the, we're really good friends and really old partners. And a lot of the motivation for some of the features came from Solana folks. And we are pretty deep in Cosmos ecosystem, and we are onboarding lots of Cosmos system nodes, starting off with Thorchain. So you're going to see Thorchain's big problem today is a lot of their nodes are running on Amazon, and that's why they recently, are incentivizing folks to move their validators to move off Amazon to Akash, and they're even incentivizing folks to do that. So you're going to see quite a bit of DeFi. I mean, these sovereign Cosmos nodes on Akash, and very, very exciting is IBC, inter-blockchain communication.
Yep.
So Akash is the so our former head of product was former head of product at Cosmos. So there's a lot of deep relations that we have with Cosmos community. And Jack Zamplin, he also was responsible for leading the Relayer effort, the sidecar that runs next to the blockchain to connect to blockchains. Inter-blockchain communication, for those of you that don't know, is a Cosmos's protocol to connect multiple blockchains.
Yeah.
And Akash Mainnet 2 is IBC ready. Today we saw a demo, phenomenal demo from I believe B Harvest, that they did the swaps between different Cosmos ecosystem tokens. They even did a swap to USDT. So you're going to see a lot of interoperability between the Cosmos ecosystem nodes to even Ethereum nodes. So that's coming in February. We're really excited about it. And Akash will be the premium platform to boot up a Relayer, and we're optimizing for IBC ready deployments. So you're going to see quite a bit of like collaborative effort from Cosmos, Solana, and communities on Akash.
That's interesting, right? Because I mean, you kind of run the gamut. Obviously, at the baseline, you can kind of run any sort of containerized workload, but like it's very interesting that you're sort of looking at. I mean, it's almost kind of almost like an Infura model, or like how do you see like Infura or like a Bison Trails, or how do you see these kind of folks in terms of like node operation?
Yeah, it's a good one. So a lot of them are. But Infura, I have interesting thoughts on. It is a centralized entity. It's a very closed entity, right? So
Sure.
in that essence, we, depending on how you look at it, we could be competing with them, or they could use us, right? So I wouldn't call it competition, because a centralized entity can offer much more services on top of a decentralized infrastructure. For example, we don't have support, right? So who do you call? We don't have contracts, right? Like, who do you sue? So we don't have those things that you want in a centralized entity if you're purely a decentralized platform. But what we can offer is a node that's probably half as cost as if you're a node. Right?
Makes sense. I mean, obviously, all that stuff comes with a premium, and we know consensus stuff isn't cheap. So,
right. So it really depends, and plus, I mean, you have the pure cost of compute, and top of that, the support cost, right? So that adds up. So we're really, for someone that is really advanced in how to run their own operations, we're really for teams that really want to decentralize their operations. A big risk of INFURA is like node centralization, right? So that we're obviously very anti to that thesis that we want to decentralize as much as possible.
Yeah, interesting. And what about like a Bison Trails type of thing?
We don't offer managed node hosting. I mean, those are managed services, right? So Bison Trails is a managed node hosting operator, and you do need someone like Bison Trails. I would use Bison Trails if I want a peace of mind, right? Like, it's a peace of mind as a service, really.
Yeah.
That's how you look at managed services. And Akash is not yet there. I mean, there could be other platforms built on top of Akash that could leverage and offer the peace of mind. But Akash in itself is a there's a lot of responsibility on your side being a decentralizer. And if you forget your keys, you're screwed. Yeah. Like,
so,
I can't stop.
So a couple of big kind of like more philosophical questions, like, one of the big incidents that I think was very recently in the news, well, you might have alluded to it, is the deplatforming of Parler, right? And so by Amazon, right? So AWS kind of kicked them off, and I think there was this protracted argument over months where Amazon kept warning them about their content and, eventually pulled the plug. So, I guess, obviously, if you think about something that's permissionless, like Akash, then like that makes a logical sense for these types of tenants. So I don't know what your perspective is on this news item and, what you think about this type of use case.
Yeah, I mean, it keeps me up at night. The
keeps a lot of people
is up. Right. Parler is so. Let's isolate first. Let's talk about Parler and see what they did wrong. They certainly had a good intention of having a free platform and being censorship resistant, but with that intention comes great responsibility. I think platforms should moderate themselves and should moderate, against things like violence, right? Free speech doesn't mean free reach. I mean, it doesn't give you permission to incite violence or encourage violence. And Parler did nothing to stop violence. It's obviously very clear now from the data we see. A lot of the users who are actually using Parler to organize this terrorist activity that happened recently. So it is a platform for terrorists. That's
by definition.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
By definition, right?
Yeah.
So when you give that amount of freedom, you need to have responsibility. You got to act responsibly. Every other platform has responsibility.
Yeah.
Now, second thing is, and you're going to see, and this is the cost of liberty, right? So I fundamentally believe censorship resistance and privacy are the foundational pillars for a liberal society, right? But the cost you pay is Parler, right? The thing that even keeps me works up at night is, what if someone puts child pornography, right?
Yeah.
Or things like that. I mean, you have like really bad people that want to, when you give them voice, that will abuse their voice, right?
Yes.
So, but that doesn't mean that. So that means the problem is not really in giving them the voice. It's a little above that, right? So in case like Akash, we're a platform, we're a protocol. At a protocol level, introducing censorship has its, well, the good things is, yes, you can probably avoid something like Parler, but the bad thing is, well, you see censorship being abused by a lot of platforms, especially in authoritative scenarios, right? So it's a double-edged sword. So as a network, our responsibility for censorship, our responsibility is not to build the censorship as a feature. our responsibility, I think, should be more foundational. But that doesn't mean we're going to go actively pursue someone like Parler and actually have them come to our network. But there's nothing we can do that's going to censor them. But that also means that we have to build enough tools to probably confront something like a Parler, right? Another argument you think of this is like, well, because Parlers was sloppy, they opened up their API, which actually helped identify all of the attackers.
Yes.
Right? They opened up the API. So they're like, well, so maybe enabling actually can further help uncover some of these people, right? So and that also tells us like it's not the foundation or the principle that's the problem. It's deeper than that. It's the people that use these platforms that abuse these platforms are the problem, right? So something like Akash, the providers are fully responsible for the content they host, right? Akash in itself, as a protocol, doesn't mandate or doesn't have the layer of like censorship built into it.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it is censorship resistant. So the protocol tries to fight against censorship, but sophisticated providers, someone like Equinix, have the tools to filter out any bad actors and boot them out. And they have the ability, and of course, they have the ability to block people that they don't want them to use the platform. There's also like, it also makes case like when you have competitors, you really don't want to give your compute to your competitors, right? So we have that sort of like blocking ability. And we're hoping to make that better so that providers have the choice in allowing or a say in who they allow. And I think Amazon's decision to actually deplatform Parler is a good thing. I mean, they have tried, they have given the warning, and also Amazon is a private company. I mean, if you really look at what's happening, it's a market self-regulating instead of government coming in and putting the regulation. So I think it's a classic example of like, yes, the market actually, self-regulated and self-corrected and got rid of what could be a Parler, but that doesn't mean that Parler is going to be offline for a few weeks. They're going to come back up, but still, I think now the question is like, is there deeper? What can we do from now on to actually really deplatform something like Parler, right? And that's a bigger discussion than do we allow or not.
Yeah. I mean,
I like sorry for the long-winded answer, but
no, it's extremely nuanced, and it's a difficult topic and very challenging, right? Because obviously, like, it goes beyond that. I think you mentioned like, child pornography is being horrible, of course, and obviously dark web, and there are a number of potentially problematic things that arise as a function of like establishment of permissionless and private systems, right? So that becomes a potential cover of darkness. So those are interesting and challenging topics.
And this is happening too with Signal now. You're seeing a lot of the Parler people going on to Signal and having the Signal groups, right? Signal doesn't have the ability to monitor chats or doesn't collect any information.
Sure.
So it'll be interesting to see what will happen in the future when you're going to have a lot of Signal groups that are used by the same people. Same thing with Telegram, right? So Telegram, there's this Milo group that I happen to just see what's happening. It's gross. Like it's like a lot of violence in there.
Yeah.
So I think it's a challenge across the board for platforms that want to have a low touch policy on privacy. I mean, on censoring things, and it's a really big discussion. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, super helpful. So it's fascinating, this system, and it's exciting to see like growth and maturation. So congratulations. One of the things that I really like is I think it's really good branding. One of the things I know from Akash is like it's one of the 5 Vedic elements, right? So it's the effectively
Sky.
I would say that probably one close, you could call it like space, but I think you could also translate it as ether, right? Like that's one way of translating the word Akash from Sanskrit. So I think it's pretty cool.
And also the sky, it's where the clouds meet, where the clouds are formed.
Oh, that's good. I like that. Cloud computing, that's also, right? There's the sky. Right. It has all kinds of implications, but I think it's very clever, and works well for your works well for your product. Yeah. So tell me kind of like how you see. So what's a part of this mainnet 2? Like what are the key features that we should be excited about?
So it's what we've been working on for 5 years. So the
Wow.
big key feature is we've been around since 2015. For those of you
Yeah, I
don't know,
remember.
we began the company as edge computing platform. That's when we discovered this massive opportunity of unused compute. When we were actually deploying this platform, we noticed 85% or so of the compute is not being used. That's our conservative estimates. Some of our estimates are actually like 95% of the compute is not being used.
It's amazing.
And so that's really what was the foundation. And we had this amazing technology that can deploy at the edge. And we effectively edge-enabled Kubernetes. This is in 2015. And so this is the first time we're showing that. I mean, we're going into production. We had incredible amounts of testing, over the last few years. We're very, very confident on the stability of the platform. Hundreds of thousands of lines of code went into making this platform. And so the biggest critical functionality is ability to deploy workloads and ability in a permissionless manner. So we're also hoping to build a web interface for this, so that you can really visualize when you have a web interface versus command line. We right now are command line only. A very Uniswap style deployment, right? You can just basically like choose an app, one click, pay for it or authorize using Kepler wallet, which is like a MetaMask style wallet that supports Akash. And boom, you see your logs. You have all your operations without giving your name, without your email, none of that stuff. I think we are hoping to be the quickest deployment platform out there, blockchain or not. So what that allows us to do is all kinds of amazing things that were not possible before. Like, hopefully we want to see blockchain projects like Thorchain or Solana having a deploy on Akash button right on the GitHub, where you can click and you go through the workflow without any sign up. So we're really excited for non-custodial deployments.
Yep.
And what we want to push further is ownerless web services, where say, for example, you're hosting a Thor node, right? And you're a validator, and you earn income using as a validator from your commission. Part of the commission can actually go to pay for compute itself on Akash without you touching an Akash wallet. So really, that completes that's really putting our foundation for a larger vision of an interoperable cloud. Today, you see an amazing set of protocols, which I'm really excited about. The decentralized cloud, you see Graph protocol, which is the middleware layer, right? It's a beautiful, it's amazing functionality. Blockchains are complicated, the data structures are diverse. Having a graph queryable layer on top of this diverse set of data structures with this massive data is what Graph provides. Someone like Handshake provides this decentralized DNS, like non-custodial way to manage DNS. And NuCypher provides key management solution, right? So in case you have encrypted or secrets or confidential stuff that you want to store on the cloud, which all of us do, you use NuCypher key management. Filecoin, Saya, Storage, Arweave, all these do long-term storage, archival storage. Akash does ephemeral compute and ephemeral storage. So you have these amazing products that are live, and a big challenge is usability. So you can't really use them together like any developer wants to.
Right.
And so SDL, we're hoping the next version, we're hoping the SDL will support all these protocols, where you can pay using any of the currencies from these protocols. It can be an Akash token or a Filecoin token, doesn't really matter. And the beautiful liquidity pools that we can tap into to do all the exchanges. I think we're going to see a very interoperable world where the user experience is going to be much better than what you'll experience on the cloud today. And we are working with NuCypher and Filecoin to make this happen. So a lot of exciting things to start with our mainnet 2 launch.
Yeah, that is amazing, right? Because in a sense, like you're effectively virtualizing this sort of layer, and you're virtualizing and decentralizing the layer of cloud computing away from the underlying provider. So it's quite a astonishing evolution of this abstraction, right? And you're doing it in, I would say kind of the style of open source, in the style of like a fully decentralized model, right? So it's very ambitious and interesting.
Yeah, and most of these nodes can actually run on a card like a what do you call it, a new cipher node, which costs about $280 per year, can run on Akash for $100. So you can actually host these nodes locally, so you can get high performance KMS services. There are lots of exciting things you can do on Akash itself, like from like all these other nodes that you can host locally and get the high performance
So you're imagining
applications to
that
operate. Yeah.
this kind of these integrations will take place through kind of this declarative deployment descriptor kind of SDL framework, right? So if your application needs things like persistent storage in various kind of modes, you can kind of specify the characteristics of the storage, and then have providers from different networks providing. That's the mindset?
Yeah. Exactly. So next big step for us is services, backend services, and this is particularly of passion to me because today, if you look at Amazon, Amazon has about 200 plus services, right? You can actually tap into, and the biggest cost for Amazon user is not compute; is actually these services. So Akash, we want to do that for decentralized services infrastructure, and also have managed services part of this marketplace. So you want a managed, database or manage MySQL, you can actually use Akash's marketplace to get those managed services. But we're doing it with a particular angle that we're going to be fully open source. So a big thing today in the cloud, and a lot of the open source community hates this, is because cloud is actually like stifling open source innovation by
Sure.
stealing their business models.
Oh
Like
yeah.
we saw a lawsuit with Elastic Cache, right? So
Yeah.
Elastic Cache sued Amazon because they would offer the same business model
Yep.
as Elastic Cache for
Yep.
much cheaper.
Yeah.
So it is a problem. It is a problem today. And in our advisor Brian Fox, who's the creator of Bash software, and the reason, and he's working on a new model wherein we can invite open source projects to offer the same service on Akash, but we can also incentivize open source authors and operators. So, for example, someone like Alex Ellis, who created OpenFast, or someone like uh, uh, Solomon Hykes, who created Docker.
Yeah.
They want to get paid for creating Docker, but they don't want to offer Docker as a service, right?
Right.
They rather prefer someone else, an operator that could run this service. So we're creating a model where Solomon can effectively get paid as a royalty by a provider that's actually providing this service at a premium. So you can create a smart contract where you can have this like contract on chain for every by usage or whatever, and they can adopt a new licensing model we're creating called Akash Builder's License, wherein it explicitly says that if you're a computer service provider, you got to pay royalties to the creator. So everybody's happy in the food chain.
Yeah, I love this. I mean, one of the things that we have been seeing is this great big kind of sucking sound of AWS coming from Seattle, right? Which is, if you look at all the open source packages, right, effectively what's happened is that they've sort of cloned the interfaces, but you don't actually know what's behind it, right? So in a sense, like AWS is kind of like done this giant embrace and extend that we saw in the Microsoft in the 1980s, right? Which is very kind of very much, Steve Ballmer's embrace and extend, right? So that's kind of what's happened with open source. And I think, in a sense, the convenience and the thing that's so amazing about this kind of etherization is that, we're really exploring what it means to go digital, right? Like I think philosophically, the thing that's so interesting is that people are becoming more and more digital and more virtual, even to the point where they're kind of electing geographic government participation. So for example, California, there's a number of folks like Elon Musk who have moved to Austin, Texas, right? And that sort of gets rid of state income taxes, right? But then there's even further, people who are opting to move to Puerto Rico, which retains U.S. citizenship, but it eliminates capital gains taxes. And, so I guess what I'm talking about is like virtualization, right? I'm talking about the process of abstraction layers being added in computing but also in life, right? So the thing that I think is fascinating about what you're describing is you're really describing kind of an extension of the Satoshi insight, right? Which is, to me, one of the things that was born by Satoshi's Bitcoin was the emergence of like an open source runtime, right? Which, which is head exploding, right? Because the thing that is true about open source software is developers of their own free will can give away their time and intellectual property as a function of having free will, right? But machines actually can't give away their compute, because machines are owned by corporations and because of the cost of the electricity, right? So the thing that became astonishing was the mining reward system, right? That freed the machines, right? So the machines could effectively become contributors to open source because of the kind of equalization, right? Because the entire proof of work algorithm is based on the idea that thermodynamically it costs energy to turn a 1 into a 0 or a 0 into a 1. Now, the thing that's ironic is that thermodynamics also asserts that it costs energy to keep a 1 and to keep a 0 right? So it's not, you don't get that for free either, which is why Filecoin exists as opposed to just IPFS. But what I'm proposing is that, the abstraction layer that you're describing is really an abstraction layer really for open source to effectively kind of, in a way, sort of move away from even the physical embodiment that's AWS, right? Like you're creating a very virtualized form of this, and I think you're decreasing the dependency on that provider.
Yeah, and effectively create DAOs that manage these services, right? I think we're moving. It's very, very exciting. Like, so Brian Fox is working on this licensing. He's very passionate. We had to pick somebody to work on it. I think it would be Brian Fox. And Solomon Hykes, the creator of Docker, he's very passionate about solving this problem. I have Alex Ellis, creator of OpenFast, and a lot of these open source folks, mainstream open source folks are very passionate about solving this problem because it's a real problem. And I think Akash being the first open source cloud, I should lead with that, right? It is a very viable open source alternative cloud to an increasingly closed system, which is really exciting.
Wow, that's very it's very philosophically fresh, and it's very novel, right? The emergence of the separation of the dependence of embodiment for compute. So that's because obviously the thing that we're not separated from is embodiment in our physical forms, right? So that's one of the things that's very interesting when you start to explore governments, right? Like a geographic government monopolizes and levies taxes, right? But it also kind of has the ability to monopolize the use of force, right? And the use of force becomes directed against the physical manifestation or the physical embodiment of humans, right? That's people can be imprisoned, like these are things that like are reserved by the government as a kind of a recourse, right? Like that's kind of the regulatory step, right? But the thing that's kind of interesting about what you're describing is you're describing kind of that, when you look at the digital body of the cloud, right, you're really looking at effectively creating a free open source abstraction, right, that effectively erases that competitive advantage for Amazon. So that's really, that's great. It's great. It's a great extension of what Satoshi wrote in his white paper, which effectively created this kind of idea of like, you can like the next level is clicking on GitHub to run, right? That's the next level, right? So I totally get where you're going with that, but like it's effectively like that with the Bitcoin node, right? What I mean by it's effectively like that is you do download it and you do run it, and maybe you containerize it or not, it doesn't matter, but like you just get it running and then it starts printing money. right. And so,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you know,
The only thing is, like, if you want to fault tolerant, you got to put your credit card in your name somewhere. That's the thing
yes,
we're trying to
yeah,
avoid.
yeah, yeah,
Nobody
yeah.
wants to put a credit card in the name.
That's good. I like that. I like that. That's a
Especially
it's
like Thorchain folks, which are fully anonymous teams. They hate going to Amazon and putting their credit card. It's just, they want to stay true to their anonymity, and really no option for them.
That's fascinating. A really fascinating tour through this kind of really virtualization layer, and it's stuff that really previously would have been impossible. So I think it's great. It's great imagination, great execution. It's really it's been a great honor to learn about all this. So really appreciate you explaining it and coming on the show.
Thanks, Miko. This was a lot of fun. Thank
Yeah,
you so much.
appreciate it a lot. Thanks so much.